welcome to this week's video. Now this is the first video I've done in a while about the Quad Cortex. So, coming up in this week's video, can the Quad Cortex go bluesy? Then rocky? Then funky? Now the reason I'm doing this video on the Quad Cortex this week is because I've finally got the best sound I've ever got out of it, which I've had it, I don't know, I should have looked up how long I've had it. I got it when it first came out, and I was kind of, is it Emperor's New Clothes? I don't know, I was kind of tempted by this neural capture idea. So when I started putting together my own sounds, I captured my own amplifiers. The best sounding one was my car Viceroy. I did all my Fender amps and everything. The best one was the car Viceroy, and it did sound exactly like it did as I was capturing it. But it's always a snapshot you're using. Now I shall explain the difference in a minute. But basically this week I had a rehearsal and I ran out of time, and I was going to be using in-ear monitors, and I thought it's easier not to use amps. Bass player just DI'd. I thought I'd DI my guitar, then we can all use in-ears, we can hear the vocals and everything. It was a proper drum kit which we put a couple of mics on. I thought it'd be much easier to use the Quad Cortex, less gear to carry, more controlled when we record it for reference. There's not going to be so much spill, so it's clearer. But I hadn't put together a profile, or a preset rather. So I quickly put together a preset, and I thought, do you know what, I'm just going to use the built-in models, the ones that it came with to start with, the ones that are probably most likely like the sound that I like to use. So basically I used the Fender Deluxe and the Marshall Plexi captures, and as I say, I'll show you in more detail in a minute, but that's the basic sound I'm using. And when I got to the gig and plugged it in and started doing some stuff, I thought, this sounds better than any other sound I've ever got out of this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a couple of clips of some different bits that I did. Firstly, I'm going to show you this Stevie Ray Vaughan one. This is Scuttlebutting, which I've never played with a band, but I want to do it with a band because I think it's a good one to do. A good opening track. So I wanted to run it with the band as the only chance we're going to get to rehearse. And basically, I haven't played it very well. It's a bit sloppy, but it's all right. I'm going to improve on it, but at least the band know it now, so I've only got myself to blame if it goes wrong. So here we are, here's a bit of Scuttlebutting. The main object of this rehearsal was actually to learn some of my original songs, as we've been requested to play some at a wedding that we've been booked for. But also my new guitar, my Les Paul, I did a review on that if you want to check that out. But I thought we were doing this was another cover, Boys Are Back in Town by Thin Lizzy. I thought you've got to be a Marshall with a Les Paul to do that track. So I'm using the Marshall Plexi patched, and this is the sound that I got for that. right at the end of the video, I'm going to show you me playing a solo of one of my original tracks, and I think it's the best thing that I played through the Quad Cortex, and it's using my Les Paul, using the Fender Deluxe amp model with some pedals in front of it, and I think it's a really good sound, and it's the best, so I'm going to leave that till last. But first I just want to go over the difference between the capture and the model. Now the captures, you're basically setting up your amp in a certain way. Excuse me if you already know this, but in case you don't, you're setting up your amp in a certain way with the EQ. You have to turn the reverb off when you do it, and the Quad Cortex puts sounds through the amp and then captures them onto a microphone. So however that microphone is placed, that's basically how you're going to capture the sound of the amp. You're taking a snapshot of how that amp is set up in that way, and then it does all this clever stuff and it puts it into the Quad Cortex. Now you do have a certain amount of control over that sound. There are tone controls on it and there are gain controls, but all they're doing is adding more gain into that snapshot. They're adding more treble to that snapshot. You're not really manipulating the amp, so the tone controls aren't interactive like they are on an amp. The difference with the model of the amp is with each component, I don't totally understand how they do this, it's very clever, but each component in these amplifiers, they digitally model them, so each bit of the software reacts the same way as the hardware would in the actual amp, which means that all the controls you've got over the amp react very similarly to they would on a real amp. So on Fender amps, because the way the tone controls work, if you turn up the bass, it doesn't just turn up the bass, it affects the middle, it affects the treble, and that's kind of the way it works. So you're effectively using it much more in the way that you would use an amp, much more so than the captures. But I was always kind of tempted by these captures because they do sound fantastic and they do sound exactly like the amp that you're capturing at the time. But as you probably have experienced yourself on gigs, I have to change my amp on every gig because it never sounds the same in every room. Although when you're using the Quad Cortex within ears, there's less variables. There's always something that changes. You might think, oh, it needs a bit more top tonight, or whatever. So in actual fact, the capture, the model is much more useful. So all I did, I used the Deluxe model with the Deluxe cabinet that it comes with, and then so I could use a more Marshall-y sound. I'll show you it in a minute, but I've got the two amps that they switch it on and off in the same signal path. So I've just got a Marshall Plexi with a 4x12. So without further ado, I'm going to go into more detail and show you the screen of the Quad Cortex filmed with my phone so you can see exactly what the preset looks like. So this is the preset. And really the thing that sounds best to me, which I was surprised about, because I've always used my captures of my car amp or some of my other amps, is this one, which is just the US Deluxe normal, which I think is a black-faced Fender Deluxe. That's the settings I've got it on, and it's just with the matching 112 US Deluxe black C12K cabinet, and I just left it with the ribbon and the dynamic exactly as it ships. I haven't changed anything on that, and I set up to press, well, you can't see it slightly out of shot, but the H button, which then switches to the Marshall, which is the Brit Plexi 50 patch. I dropped the gain quite a lot, especially with the Les Paul. It was a bit too gainy. So that's the settings I've got to match the output roughly. It's a little bit louder than the Fender amp. And then the cabinet, I tried about 3 of them. Oh, that wasn't the one I thought I used, but that's the one I'm using. I thought the one I was using was one of these ones. I shall have to go through that. If I upload this preset, I will check that that's the right one. But it sounds all right, that one. Maybe I did choose that one. I've forgotten. Stop press. This was the cabinet I was supposed to be using. It doesn't sound massively different, but I do prefer the sound, and it matches better with the Fender. So that's the 412 Brit 35B Alnico Cream. That was the one I preferred out of the 412 cabinets. Anyway, the rest of the preset is, I put a gain block here. Just sometimes it's just a clean boost, really. Just gives me 12 dB of extra gain, which is quite handy if you want a solo with a clean sound, or cleaner sound than putting the drive pedal on. Then I've got my wah-wah, which is the crying wah, which I have on an expression pedal, and I have the switch on the front of it so I can switch it on and off like a normal wah-wah pedal. Then I've got, this is what I've got on my normal pedal board, but instead of using the captures I've done, again, I just used the models on here. That's the Chief BD2, which is the blues driver, which I've got on my pedal board. Then a Tube Screamer 808, same as I've got on my pedal board. Actually, if I turn these on, oh, it's making a funny noise now on the headphones. Turn those on, you can see my settings more easily. Setting on that there, and that's for the tube screamer. Then I've got a tremolo on there, which I'm using on one of the tracks, which I've got synced, so I can tap the tempo on the bottom right hand switch, same as you do for the delay. Then I've got a phaser, which I've set slightly slow speed. It's quite handy for some things. Then what else have I got here? I've got a delay on there. Let's turn that on so you can see it. Just a standard mono analog delay. And then, as I say, the two different amps, I've got them in line, so when I press that, I can switch between either amp, because I wanted the same effects before and after, so I thought there's no point splitting the signal. And then finally, I have a spring reverb, which I've just tried to make sound like the spring reverb in my amp, which sounds pretty good. But from the default, I have to drop the mix and increase the damping because it's a bit more reverb than I like on the default setting, but I need a little tweak. And then finally, because I use this with in-ear monitoring, I have, and you know, if I was being really fancy, I could maybe send a separate signal with this room thingy, but actually it sounds quite nice going through the PA even with this room in, but it just makes it sit in my in-ears a little bit more nicely. It just adds a subtle bit of room rather than it sounding right in my lug holes. It sounds more like it's playing in a room. So there we are, that's that preset. Pretty simple, all stuff that it shipped with from day one, I think. Maybe the phaser came later, but I think that was what was on it when I bought it. And I've kind of ignored it up until now, which thinking I needed to use the more fancy stuff, which clearly I don't, because this is definitely the best sound I've got out of this thing. So the very next day after that rehearsal that I set this up for, I actually had a gig where I had to use the Quad Cortex. We were all using in-ears. Now this was a bizarre gig. It's basically, it's in the middle of nowhere, so I don't know what the problem is, but they have real problem with noise complaints from the neighbours. I don't know where the neighbours are, they must be miles away, unless there's one house right next to it. This is often the way. The most restrictive venues are the ones that you think are in the middle of nowhere, because I guess it's so quiet generally, whereas the ones that are in the middle of a city, there's so much noise everywhere, they're not so bothered. But anyway, it's the most restrictive sound policy of any venue. You're not allowed to take any speakers with you at all. Everything has to go into the house PA. You basically, all you can take is a mixing desk and amp modelers. They provide you an electronic drum kit if you haven't got one. So basically it's a silent stage, apart from they do have 2 floor wedges which you're allowed to use. And if you check out one of my recent reviews of one of my new bits of kit which I've been using, it's an Allen Heath CQ18T, and actually this gig that I knew was coming up was the kind of reason that I finally took the plunge and got myself a digital mixer, because I knew I was going to have to use it on this gig. And basically you plug everything into your digital mixer, or any mixer, out of the main outs you plug into the wall of the venue, which goes into their PA system, which they have control of the master volume, and there's also 2 inputs for monitors and 2 outputs that go to their own floor wedges, and that's all you've got. All the other rest of the control is up to them, and we all used in-ears and the floor wedges, which I've got complete control over. But it's the most restrictive venue ever. But that's why I had to use my Quad Cortex the next day, and I was so pleased with the sound. I thought, I'm not going to use the ones I've set up in the past for that kind of gig. I'm going to use this preset that I've just created. So I'm just going to show you some clips, because I did some sort of different styles here. So this first one is a kind of, well, it is a Nile Rodgers track. It's Thinking of You. So a bit of funk through the Quad Cortex. See what you think. So I think for this whole gig I used the Fender one. I didn't really switch over to the Marshall because it's not really suitable, and I only had my Strat with me. I didn't want to have too many different variables. So this next one, another bit of funk, slightly different though. This is Luther Vandross, what's it called? I can't remember what the song's called. Should have looked it up beforehand. Never Too Much. So check this one out, slightly different sound. It's a front pickup of the Strat, or middle position. I think I might have swapped it to at one point, but slightly different funk sound, but clean sound. So check this one out. And then finally a bit of soloing. This will be the deluxe with possibly the blues driver and the tube screamer in front of it, and there's some wah-wah as well. So this is Superstition, so check this one out. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video and you like the guitar tones. I have to say I'm really impressed with those models on here, to the point where I actually started to think, you know, on some gigs I could use this instead of my amp. What I haven't tried ever, which I think might be good, because the only thing I do find with this is if I'm singing as well, that because the buttons are quite close together, if I need to make effects switches in between, sometimes it's tricky. I have to look what I'm doing, whereas I'm much more used to have with my pedal board, because everything's bigger and further apart. It's easier to use while I'm singing. So what I would like to do one day is have my pedal board going into the amp model on the Quad Cortex and see how that sounds. But for the first time I'm thinking, do you know what, I could for certain things use the Quad Cortex in preference to my amp. I mean, at the moment I use it when it's more convenient, but I'd still always rather have my amp. But now I'm using in-ears, it makes less difference, I have to say. When I'm playing without in-ears and just surrounded by the sound of the band, I still like to have my amp. But once you're all on in-ears, then the difference with the Quad Cortex is minimal, I think. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. Please leave me a comment, let me know what you think of the tones. I bring out new videos at 7 PM UK time every Friday, so hit like, hit subscribe, hit the bell, then you know when my new videos are coming out. I'm going to leave you, as promised, with this track. This is called Dreamcatch. This is one of my original songs. It's on Spotify and all the digital platforms, and there's a live version of me playing it on the YouTube channel if you want to check that out. So this is called Dreamcatcher, and this was just in rehearsal, but I'm very pleased with the sound. Les Paul into the Quad Cortex. Check this out and hope to see you next week.